What is going on, y'all? It's your man Bobby Kintu back in the house. And today we got a really interesting discussion today on the science and the magic of ADHD. And people have a lot of different divisive debates over ADHD. Medicaid or not? Is it real or not? What's the best treatment? Does it lead to other harder drugs when you do use medication? What's effective? So it's a lot to unpack when you're dealing with this. And then when you're looking at the numbers, it gets even more interesting. But today, we want to get more into the science and the magic and the word play and the word power and how much power goes into this particular word. First of all, if we break down ADHD, we got to talk about Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And that right there is a lot packed up into a nutshell. But attention, to attend to something, we don't even really know what attention is. Does it mean that you're looking at something? Does it mean that you're listening to it? Does it mean that you're feeling it with your skin? What does attend mean? Deficit. As soon as you start telling somebody they have a deficit, that's already problematic. Now you have other disabling conditions like schizophrenia where you don't have to use deficit or disorder in it. But you look at ADHD, it got both in there, disorder and deficit, so you get double whammied. Hyperactivity, now that's a misnomer because it leaves out the fact that you can also be inattentive, but we'll talk about that in a second. So it just takes into account people who are hyperactive, moving around too much, fidgety, tics, verbal outbursts, all of those things. So just right there, you can see how the name has already shaped how you think about certain people who may or may not have this condition. Now, is it real or not? That depends on what society you live in. Obviously, those people develop those skills for a reason, and not everybody who has what we call symptoms of ADHD have problems with their life. Matter of fact, a lot of big CEOs do very well with ADHD, and if you think about Western culture, it actually supports that type of behavior. Quick decisions, looking at the forest from the trees, looking at the big picture, getting people together, communicating with a lot of different people in a lot of different time zones, being real active, always putting content out. All those are valued, and people with quote unquote ADHD can do those things without a problem. Where it does become a problem is where it affects your daily life, and to the point where you cannot finish daily tasks. You cannot make any type of long-term goals. You can't basically function day to day without some type of outside support or guidance. And that brings us to the debate of, should you medicate or not? Now, that's a decision for each person, but we will say this: serving somebody with a hyperactivity disorder with stimulants sounds counterintuitive, but when you know that it stimulates the part of the brain that says calm down, makes it a little bit better. But then the fact that it's becoming recreationalized and people are selling it and using it to enhance their performance in other areas such as sports or test taking shows you that it may not be as necessary to control those symptoms as some might say. Now, me personally, I say if somebody about to hurt themselves or you about to hurt somebody else, maybe that might be something you want to look at. But outside of that, it's something that you're going to get used to at some point. You're not going to be able to see things as good as you did at one point. You're not going to be able to speak as clearly. You're not going to be able to focus as nicely because your brain is going to get used to whatever you're using, the Strattera, the Focalin, the Concerta, the Adderall. It does not matter. Whatever you use in your brain will, and your body will get used to it. And you say, well, I'm going to go to the doctor for another dose, but guess what? They're just going to up it and you're going to get used to that too. So you have to figure out a way to be able to deal with those symptoms outside of just using some more, what I call drugs. Can't even call it medication, it's straight up drugs. And does it lead to other harder drugs or not? Well, the research shows that if you've been diagnosed with ADHD, you actually have a less chance, if you have been taking drugs, to later on go into harder drugs. They say that people who do not take any drugs to help control their symptoms, later on go on to self-medicate because they didn't understand how to regulate their doses at a younger age. And my thing is, we just have to change the name of it or get rid of this label to begin with, because it's not that one group is able to do it and one group can't do it. It's that, first of all, you got to get a label before you can get into any one of those groups. So what does that say about the label itself? As soon as you label somebody with ADHD, maybe they have a higher chance of gaining access to other drugs or self-medicating on their own. So it's something to think about. So, I'm not here to give you a different name, but you can think about it as, regulation, mood regulation. You can think about it as activity regulation. And then we didn't even get into the fact that you have two types of this disabling condition. You got hyperactive type for people who are, like I said, motory, fidgety, motor agitation, making frequent activity changes. And then you got those people who are just inattentive. They can't pay attention to anything. There's so much information coming at them that they have a hard time filtering out what is pertinent and what's not. And they have a hard time making decisions, and they have a hard time sticking through with plans when they do make them. And you might say, well, that sounds like me. You might have a full-time job. You might be running a business. You might have kids, or a full family, have some friends, and be able to go out. People who are really struggling ain't able to do any of that, okay, to any normalcy. And you will see that in people who you might just meet them in right off the bat, that their motor activity just kind of rubs you a little bit different. You can feel the energy. And those people might need a little bit of assistance trying to figure out how to gain access to social circles and things like that. But there's a lot of ways to do it outside of popping a few pills. So looking at the magic of it, you have a lot of words. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder that you got to break down. I know a lot of psychologists say, well, it's just absent daddy at home disorder. And that might be true, partly. But you also have to deal with people who, they have daddies and they dealing with this. What about that? Okay. What about when they have mama and daddy? How you gonna dig that one out? So the name just needs to be changed. Names have power. Words have power. And what you call something is what that then becomes. So changing this double deficit, I call it, deficit and disorder, into something more positive can definitely help change the outcomes that we're seeing right now with people with this label who got this magic being placed on their heads. So fight back with your own magic, with your own word power. You come think of some ideas and let me know what you might think would be a good name for it, how to switch it up. What do? Do you think it's real or not? Do you think early drug use leads to later on experimentation with drugs? It's all something to think about. But hit me up and let me know what y'all think. Bobby Kintu back with another episode of this magic, this heck out, this word power. And we'll be back in another episode. And we'll catch you then. Peace.